Hello, and welcome back to Midnight Sleep Scientist, a small, quiet place where big questions put on soft slippers and wander slowly. If you're settling into bed, tucking into a couch, or just letting the day loosen its grip, you're in gentle company. Tonight's hush holds a wonder. What's on the other side of the universe? Not an edge you could touch, perhaps. More like a horizon of light and time. A place where seeing gives way to imagining. We'll drift there together, without hurry, through the idea of cosmic outsides, through expanding space, through what we can know and what might always remain a velvet maybe. Along the way, you can let your thoughts grow lighter, like dust motes turning in a moonbeam. Nothing to solve, only to feel your mind lengthen and soften. If this keeps you awake for a moment, that's all right. Curiosity can be a lullaby too. For now, let your shoulders settle, let the room become a harbor, and let the stars, real or remembered, gather quietly at the back of your mind. And if you're still awake later, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Your city, your sky, your little corner of the dark. We begin where night itself begins, with a horizon. You know the feeling. A lake at evening, the water darkening from pewter to ink, the far shore smudging into a simple line. Lights twinkle there, porch lamps, a late bicycle's gleam, the flicker of someone's kitchen window, and yet they arrive to you not instantly, but as if the world inhales before answering. Sound lags over distance. Light, too, takes its time. We rarely notice in our everyday neighborhoods, but on a lake you can sense it, the gap between the thing and its appearing. The universe is a lake like that, only the shore is very far, and time itself sits with us on the dock. When we tilt our head back and look into the dark, we are seeing a sphere of possibilities bounded by patience. Astronomers sometimes call it the observable universe, which is simply the part of the whole from which light has had time to reach us since the cosmos first became transparent to light. It's not a fence, it's not a wall, it is a horizon, drawn not by anything outside of us, but by the age of the light that has arrived here, to your eyes, tonight. That horizon is both intimate and immense. Intimate because you stand exactly at its center, not because you are the center of everything, but because each observer holds their own horizon, stitched to their place and time. Immense because the distances involved melt the edges of our intuition. The further out we look, the farther back in time we are peering. The galaxy glowing faintly in your imagination right now may be seen as it was when ancient seas were new, when mountains wore different names, when our world was a whisper of itself. To look outward is to look backward, like reading old letters that arrived decades late and still carry the scent of their sender. We might try to picture this. Imagine you're standing in a clearing, and fog has rolled in from every side, dense and pearly. You can see a certain distance before the grey becomes too thick. If you wait, if you simply stand there, warm in your coat, listening to your breath, the fog thins a little more. Your horizon expands, not because the world itself has grown, but because more of it has become visible to you. There's a gentle paradox there. When we look far away, we look into the past, yet as we wait longer, we see farther. The boundary of what's visible keeps evolving, making room for more distant stories to reach us. Somewhere, billions upon billions of miles and years from where you are tucked now, a young galaxy's first efforts at starlight are only just brushing the edge of our awareness. In a night not yet here, that light will touch us. The universe's other side will become, by a hair, less other. We can soften this even more. You don't need to hold numbers or names. Think instead in textures. Light that has traveled to us is a kind of fabric, woven out of time. The threads are taut, but not tense. They arrive with the ease of constant. They bring with them the colors of distance. Wavelengths stretched by the expansion of space. Tones deepened the way a violin's note lowers when the string is lengthened. Nothing is rushing, and nothing is late. In a universe that is always moving, calm is possible, because the movement has rhythm. That rhythm is why the horizon is not a sharp line. It is a soft threshold, like the edge of sleep. On one side is what has already met us. On the other is what may in time become knowable. Beyond that, there is still more, but it remains in the privacy of its own moments. A city you have never visited can be real without being present to your senses. The same is true for the regions of the cosmos that lie beyond our current sight. To think of the other side of the universe is to admit that more might exist than our lights can gather this evening. It is not a frustration, it is permission. We do not need to carry everything. Sometimes, when people hear horizon, They picture an edge with a drop. Perhaps there's a childhood memory of a map with a crisp border, a sea dragon's warning, an end of parchment. Our modern skies invite a gentler image. The horizon is an agreement between distance and time. You can walk toward it forever, and it will keep its respectful space, retreating as you move. In this sense, the universe's horizon is not telling us where reality ends. It is telling us where today's letters from the sky have opened, and where tomorrow's might open next. Consider the ordinary way a message travels among friends. A postcard leaves one hand and crosses mountains by mail, waits at windswept depots, rides a truck, slips into a bag, emerges into a slot, and finally one afternoon slides to your floor with the soft sound of paper on wood. That's what starlight does. It is a kind of postcard from a place as it used to be, from a time not this one. We do not scold a postcard for arriving late. We run a finger over its corners, smile at the smudge of ink, and feel the warmth of a friendship that has crossed space to find us. The sky is full of such postcards. Every point of light is a message that travelled. Every glow is a hello. And so, when we speak of what lies on the other side, we are not hunting for a cliff. We are acknowledging a kindness that we are bathed in messages from only so far, and that this so far is the generous measure of the universe's age and our position within it. A different observer, in a galaxy far from ours, will have a different horizon. They will be at the center of their own observable sphere, not because they are special, but because horizons are personal. That too is soothing. The cosmos is vast enough to give each of us a private window, and tender enough to let those windows overlap, so our views rhyme. How do we know any of this without lifting the pace of our thought? One way is through noticing the way starlight stretches. As space itself expands, the waves of light lengthen, and their color slides slowly toward the red. We give this a name, but the name is not important tonight. What matters is the feeling that faraway things carry slow music. We can listen for it by comparing the same tune, the same spectral lines from different singers in the sky. The farther the singer, the longer the note. It is a quiet concert, measured in patience, not urgency. If you prefer another image, return to the lake. The far shore's lights appear steadier and more golden, smoothed by distance. Their reflections pull long and waver, and yet they do not break. You can understand their stories without counting them. You can feel the hush they give your body. The cosmos, too, offers reflections we do not need to name to be comforted by them. You might wonder, gently, if the horizon grows as time passes, could we ever see everything? Perhaps not. There may be regions forever out of reach, not because they don't exist, but because the universe's expansion keeps some lights always beyond our meeting. That is a thought for another chapter. For now, it is enough to know that the part we can see is already a miracle of inclusion. Think of the infant cosmos becoming clear, the first light struggling free of fog, the earliest stars awakening, and now think of that light, aged and softened by its voyage, finally finding you in the dark of this room. You are the shore where it lands. There is a subtle humility in this. We do not occupy the universe, as one might sit in the center of a room, commanding every corner. We live inside a story that arrives in installments, chapters delivered by light. Each night, more pages flutter down. We read what we can, we turn what we have into understanding, and we sleep with the knowledge that the book continues beyond our bedside lamp. This is not a loss, it is an invitation to rest. It says, your part is enough for now. Remember too, that horizons do not make things smaller, they make things possible. Sailors used them to measure routes. Gardeners use them to feel the size of their field. The line where sky meets land gives scale, and scale gives comfort. To know that your observable universe has a shape spherical from here, centered where you rest, is not to claim it as all that is, but to let your mind find a place to stand, even if the whole is stranger, larger, perhaps boundless in ways that are hard to cradle at midnight. The part we share is cradled in light that has honestly come to us. If you like, close your eyes for a moment and picture a single star. Not a specific star with a famous name, just a small point that has become precious to you for no reason but that you found it once. And it seemed to notice you. Imagine the journey its light has taken, past drifting dust, past the faint gravity murmurs of worlds, past the quiet flowering of nebulas, whose colors your eyes would call impossible, and into the dome of our sky, through an atmosphere you have known since childhood, and onto the soft mirrors of your eyes. That path is real. That meeting is real. The star as it is now is another story, perhaps well changed. But the star as it was has come to be with you. Both can be true at once, and both are restful. We are often taught to think of knowledge as a kind of conquest. Tonight, let it be a harbour. We know what we know because light was kind enough to come here, and because we were quiet enough to notice. The edge of what we can see is not a deficiency. It is the last candle of today's vigil, flickering on a windowsill, promising that morning will bring more. The other side of the universe is not a cliff we must reach. It is simply the part whose letters have not arrived, and may never need to for your heart to be whole. You can lean back into your pillow and let this be enough. The horizon is wide, and it is yours, and it will be wider when you wake. Beyond it lies more world, more questions, more light in pilgrimage. Within it lies you, breathing, warm, intact. The distance between those two facts is called wonder, and it is gentle. Let it hold you. And if a thought returns later, what about shapes and loops? About edges that curve back into themselves? About the first light's whispering map? We will walk there next, unhurried. For now, listen to the room. Feel how the air pools in the low places, how the blankets have gathered a small climate of their own. The universe reaches you as light. You reach back as ease. The horizon we can see is already a vast kindness. Let it be our lullaby tonight, and let your eyelids become their own soft border, closing like dusk over a calm lake, as the stars keep writing their long letters in ink, the color of sleep. Night seems to arrive all at once, but when you watch closely, it comes in layers, like a curtain drawn by a patient hand. Street by street, window by window, the colors soften. The world is still present, leaves still turn, a distant train still hums, yet the edges blur until the dark is settled and the lamps do the speaking. We sometimes talk as if night has a speed, as if dusk pours downhill and pools in the valleys, as if the sky flips from one state to the next at a certain pace. In truth, what you feel is not a measure of darkness racing in, but a choreography of light, where it comes from, how it travels when it reaches you, and how the space between you and its source has been quietly changing while it moves. It's less a switch, and more a long, careful exchange. Think of a child's voice calling from the far side of a field. You hear the call, and then the echo from a barn wall, and then, faintly, another echo from the trees. Each sound began together, but the route it took made a difference. Light, too, takes routes, straight lines in local spaces, bending only when gravity asks it to. But because the distances can be vast, the arrival feels like a tide. If you could watch the whole sky with unblinking attention, you might sense it, the slower brightening of some stars as the air steadies, the thin delay of a satellite's glint, the way distant galaxies reveal themselves only after your eyes have settled into their night vision. The cosmos is always arriving. When we look outward, we look backward. That's the tender paradox. The faint smudge your eyes catch at the edge of vision isn't only far away, it's young. We are not seeing it as it is tonight, but as it was when the light left, when its stars were learning the tastes of fusion, when its gas was still deciding where to gather. Every blink is time travel, inexpensive and complete. You do it without effort. You do it from your pillow. The mind loves to reach for a number, for a unit to hold. But tonight we might let numbers be the hum beneath the melody, not the melody itself. What matters is the feeling that the farther a source of light, the softer and older its message when it arrives. You can imagine the note of a violin being drawn out, the bow pulling longer and longer, until the pitch falls into a honeyed hush. Something like this happens to ancient light. As space itself stretches, the color shifts. The message takes on a deeper tone, not wrong, not broken, just changed by the voyage. It's as if time stitched new fabric into the wave as it traveled, lengthening the thread while keeping the pattern intact. This stretching is gentle enough that you don't need to wrestle it. You can picture a traveler crossing an old wooden bridge. Each plank creaks, and the span itself sways very slightly. The traveler remains the traveler. The bridge remains the bridge, and yet the motion changes the gait, lends the footsteps a certain rhythm. Light crosses the bridge of expanding space in a similar spirit. It remains light, but its stride is tuned by the path. What does this mean for our question about the other side? It suggests that the universe does not have edges the way a table has edges. It has horizons tuned by time, and by this slow music, regions beyond our hearing, beyond our sight, fuse their own notes in private, and that is all right. We may never catch their sound, just as a song from a far street might fade before it reaches your window. You can know the city is still singing without needing to recognize the tune. There's another tenderness in the speed of night. It respects your pace. Your eyes do not snap to perfect darkness. They wander down to it, like a boat easing into deeper water. Rods wake in your retinas, adjust and gift you more of the dim. This is a living analogy for the way we come to understand the sky. We do not grasp it all at once. We dwell with it. We let the deeper layers reveal themselves as we soften our gaze. Understanding is a kind of dark adaptation too. Memory behaves this way. Think of a story you've told yourself for years. On some quiet evening, a new detail rises. A scent you had forgotten, a laugh, the color of a coat, and the whole story shifts by a hue. It isn't that the past changed, it's that your access deepened, your horizon of remembrance widened. The cosmos, arriving as light, invites the same compassion. What we know this century is larger than what was known a century ago because more messages have reached us, and because our instruments, our shared eyes, have learned to see fainter letters. Tomorrow will bring more arrivals. We can welcome them without needing to hurry toward them. If you step to a window now and look out, the night you meet is a weaving. Near lights speak in quick syllables. Their messages are short and current. Far lights carry long sentences layered with time. Across them all is a quiet modulation, a deepening of tone that hints at the journey they have endured. You don't have to name the effect to hear it. You can simply listen. The hush seems warmer. The colors seem longer. The whole sky slightly more patient than your daytime mind expects. Sometimes, a person will ask, almost playfully, whether darkness travels, in a way it does, by retreat. When the sun slides behind the curve of our world, daylight withdraws like a tide, but cosmically, the night we feel is not the rushing in of dark, it is the measured arrival of light from grand distances, plus the gentle dimming of our own bright local star. The rest of the universe is not switching off. It is constantly speaking. We join that conversation when the noise of our day reduces enough for us to hear. If your thoughts feel busy, let this be your escape hatch, not out into nothing, but into slowness. Imagine the sky sending you a lullaby, tuned by distance. Each note stretched just enough to cradle your mind. Imagine your breath falling into time with it. An inhale that gathers the present, an exhale that lets it go. The speed of night becomes the speed of your own easing. Gently, we can widen the frame. Long ago, before space grew transparent, light could not roam freely. It scattered, bumping into particles in a bright fog. When that fog thinned and the first free light streamed, the universe was still very young. Much of what we see tonight, soft static, a faint afterglow everywhere, may be the oldest surviving whisper of that moment. Later stars kindled in pockets, galaxies arranged their slow spirals, clusters found each other, and still the messages kept moving, some so far that their colors deepened into warmth we cannot see with naked eyes, but can feel with careful instruments. All of this is to say, night has been practicing for a very long time. It knows how to arrive. And yet, even with all this history, what reaches you is intimate. A single photon, one tiny packet of light, lands on the surface of your eye and begins a chemical conversation with your cells. A cascade follows. Electrical and ordinary, and astonishing. Somewhere in your brain, a pattern is updated, a dot is added to the picture, and the sky becomes a fraction brighter. The universe at scale can feel unspeakably large, but your meeting with it is personal, bodily, small enough to live in a heartbeat. That paradox is friendly. It means you can cradle the infinite in the cup of your attention and not be overwhelmed. You may notice, as you sit with this, that questions grow softer around the edges. How fast does night fall becomes how kindly does light arrive. What's on the other side becomes what has not reached us yet and may never need to. Let's return, briefly, to our lakeshore. The far lamps have taken on their steady glow. A fish turns near the surface, leaving a circle that widens and then disappears into the dark. You can't follow the circle to its end, but you know it continued. You don't need to see every ripple to be satisfied. The sky is like that. Evidence of further motions folded into what is visible, the deepens of color in distant galaxies, the softened contrasts, the slow accumulation of faint points all hint at the journeys still underway beyond your current reach. This is not a tease. It is a promise that reality is generous enough to exceed your current frame and gentle enough not to demand you hold more than you can. There's a nice symmetry here. As the universe's messages stretch and slow with distance, so do we when we settle into night. We elongate our minutes. We lengthen our pauses. We take the pitch of our day down by a note or two, or three, until speaking feels like humming and thinking feels like gliding. You might feel it now, a spreading ease, like ink in water, turning the whole glass a quiet shade. This is not sleep yet, but the kindness that leads to it. If a last thought needs tending before we drift onward, it is that the speed of night is not a race to the dark, but a reunion with old light. The edges of our vision are lined with messages that have been traveling longer than our species has had names for the stars. To join them is to join a continuity that holds, whether or not we stay awake to witness every moment. You can let that continuity carry you. The sky is still writing. Your body is allowed to rest between sentences. And as we move, unhurried, toward the next region of our journey, the places where edges aren't edges at all, where expansion is not motion through space, but of space, we take with us this rhythm. Light arrives with patience. Night falls by listening. The universe leans in at a pace that matches your breath. Let the room be dim. Let the window be a quiet mirror. Let your thoughts swim like slow fish under glassy water. The speed of night is exactly right, and you are already in step with it. Imagine waking to a morning fog along a wide meadow road. You start walking, and the far end of the lane moves with you, always a little ahead, always just beyond the last fence post you can make out. You are not being tricked. Nothing is running away. The horizon simply keeps a courteous distance, the way a cat will choose to remain exactly one arm's length farther than your reach. It isn't an edge, it's a companionable limit that travels with you. The universe, in its grand way, behaves like that. We often inherit an image of space as a big room with walls, perhaps a ceiling studded with stars. It's a homely picture, but not a helpful one. The more we listen to what the light tells us, the clearer the gentler truth becomes. There may be no outer wall at all, no place where a traveler would bump their shoulder and turn back. What we can see is bounded by time, and what exists may be boundless, or it may be round in a way that does not require an edge. This is where people reach for analogies, and they do help, so long as we hold them lightly. One classic is the surface of a balloon, with tiny dots drawn for galaxies. As the balloon inflates, each dot finds every other dot drifting away, not because the dots are scurrying, but because the surface between them is stretching. There is no preferred center on the surface itself. Pick any dot, and you are in the middle of the pattern. If you could only live on the skin, 2 dimensions, no peeking inside, you would never find an edge. Walk long enough in one direction, and perhaps you would return home, surprised to arrive behind yourself. The image is useful, yet imperfect. Real space is not a skin, and there's no rubber to blow into. Nothing sits outside the balloon to do the inflating. Still, the feeling it gives, the sense of separation increasing without motion through a fixed background, holds. Galaxies may be mostly at rest with respect to their neighborhood, and yet the distance between far neighborhoods grows. It's not a crowd rushing to the exits, it's the aisles lengthening while everyone keeps their seats. If that makes your mind tilt a little, you're not alone. We are creatures schooled by rooms and roads. Our language grew up in villages with gates and in fields with fences. To admit a realm with no border is to invite a softer kind of understanding, one that relies less on corners and more on continuity. You can let the image of an edge simply dissolve, like a sugar cube in tea, leaving only sweetness without the hard shape. There's a quiet liberation in that. A universe without a reachable rim doesn't demand the anxiety of arrival. You cannot fail to get to the end if there isn't one to get to. What appears to be an edge, a limit to what you can observe, shrugs into being a horizon, which has always been a promise rather than a prohibition. Horizons say, more lies ahead, and in the same breath, you are safe to rest here. If we return to the meadow road, we can play with another picture. Suppose the mist lifts, and you see to your delight that the path you're walking curves not toward a gate, but gently upon itself. There are lanes like this in old towns, streets that loop in kind silence, bringing you back to a square where the bakery windows glow, and the baker smiles surprised to see you again, so soon. Such a loop has no edge, though it is not infinite. It is complete. The universe could be like this in a higher, subtler sense. Space joined to itself so that marching forever in one direction would be a long trip with a homecoming at the end. Perhaps the signs we have are suggestive but not definitive, and that is all right tonight. We can hold both possibilities, the boundless and the edgelessly rounded, as friendly hypotheticals without needing to decide. What matters for rest is the felt difference between edge and horizon. An edge invites urgency. What's beyond? How do we cross? Will we fall? A horizon invites pacing. What arrives? How do we welcome? Can we wait? You can feel the body's answer change with the word. Edge tightens the shoulders. Horizon loosens them. There is another gentle truth threaded through this. Even if there were a way to sail forever, a traveler would not outrun the growth of distance itself. In the great tapestry of expansion, the spacing of the threads increases as the tapestry is woven. You could walk a lifetime without approaching a particular far light, not because you are slow or because it is fleeing, but because the cloth between you and it is blooming, stitch by stitch. The right response isn't to strain, it is to understand the fabric. Once you understand the fabric, you can rest within it. We sometimes hear, with a spark of worry, that distant galaxies recede faster than light. The worry comes from a room-trained mind. It imagines a speed limit sign and a reckless driver, but the sign applies to motion through space, not to the making of more space between distant places. No law is broken when the aisles lengthen. The orchestra still plays in time, the lights dim softly, the stagehands move with grace. The show continues without a crash or a chase. What does all this mean for the phrase, the other side of the universe? Perhaps it means the phrase is a kind of poem. Other side suggests a riverbank, a door, a fence with a view through the slats. The universe may not be made of sides at all. It might be all river, all doorways, all paths that bend until they meet themselves again. Or it might be larger than the word side can carry, like trying to weigh fog with a kitchen scale. If the word sends you searching for a wall, try trading it for beyond. Beyond can be endless, without being abrupt. Beyond can be calm. Consider your own life for a moment. The ways your days have expanded, not by sprinting, but by stretching to include more kinds of light. You didn't rush to the edge of yourself and jump. You grew like a tree, ring within ring, the outer one wider than yesterday's. There was no edge to cross, only new sunlight to welcome. The cosmos in one reading offers the same lesson at scale: growth without border, change without cliff. A soft chronology can be helpful here. There was a time when the distances between things were smaller, and a time after that, and after that, things cooled. Structures formed, stars like lanterns, galaxies like gardens, clusters like towns. As the spacing increased, the local bonds held, solar systems remained gathered, galaxies kept their wheeling grace. While the grand gaps widened, no one commanded this, and no one must fix it. The tapestry did what tapestries do. It displayed its pattern as it was woven. If you step outside, perhaps not now, but on some clear night when you feel like meeting the sky, you can rehearse the feeling of edgelessness without mathematics. Pick a star, choose a direction, let your imagination walk there on an invisible path. When you reach the end, let the path bend, not back toward you but forward upon itself, so that progress becomes its own return. Feel how the anxiety drains from the picture. You can walk forever without falling off anything. The path carries you because it is the path, and you are always on it. Another image, pages in a book. When you open to the middle, the left page and the right page are near each other, separated by the thinnest seam. Their worlds are distinct yet adjacent. If a tiny creature lived ink-deep on the left, it might know the right existed, unless a story looped around and returned. Our space could have seams like that. No torn edges, just joins. If so, another side might be nothing more than a neighbor reached by a long, curved sentence. You don't have to choose a favorite metaphor. You can let them drift like small boats on a bay, each carrying a candle. The candlelight is the part that matters, the sense that edges need not be harsh, that beyond can be gentle, that we are permitted to live well inside a hole we cannot outline. And this returns us, with a smile, to the practical kindness of horizons. Every place, every time, every person stands at the center of their own circle of seeing. Your circle is drawn by light's age and by the shape of space, the way a cozy room is drawn by lamplight and walls. Someone else, on a far shore of the cosmic lake, stands in their own circle. Where those circles overlap, a common sky is shared. Where they do not, there is still kinship. Two readers in the same vast library, turning different pages under the same quiet rules of grammar. If you listen, you can hear how restful this is. We are not outside looking in, or inside looking out. We are within, looking within. We are not pressed against a border, straining to know what lies behind it. We are seated comfortably by a window that opens in pace with time. The window is large, and it will be larger tomorrow. The scene beyond it is endlessly composed of paths that do not end. So let your thoughts unclench. Let the idea of an edge melt. If only for tonight. The dark outside your window is not a lid. It is a continuation. The other side does not need to be conquered or crossed. It can be honored as the part of the story that is still being written, the chapter we will receive when the author is ready, when the paper is dry, when the ink has found its lines. Rest in that possibility. Let it round the corners of your mind. And as we move, slowly, kindly, toward the first light's whisper and the baby picture of the cosmos, carry this with you. Where we expect a wall, we may find a horizon. Where we imagine a cliff, we may discover a curve. And where we fear an ending, we might meet a gentle return. A hill at evening, grass leaning one way in the breeze. You lie back, and the sky becomes a wide bowl, the rim a soft line of trees. Clouds move like ships around a curve you can feel, but not trace with a finger. The world suggests a shape without showing you the whole of it. That feeling, that quiet inference, may be the best way to approach the universe's own form. Perhaps space is straight as a well-made road. Perhaps it bends gently, like the side of a globe. Perhaps it opens like a saddle, cupping and releasing at once. Each of these is a way of saying how lines behave when they roam far from home. Take two beams of light that begin side by side. In a straight world, what we might call flat, they stay politely parallel, like rails that never meet. In a rounded world, they may lean toward each other, as if drawn by a distant reunion. In a saddle-shaped world, they slowly part, companions wishing each other well as they wander off into their own valleys. No drama, only temperament. You can test this, in a small human way, with triangles. The universe extends the whisper to a chorus too large for a single desk or globe. We listen through light, through the patterns of very old afterglow, through how clusters of galaxies gather. The hints suggest a world that is, on the largest scales we can read, very near to flat. Curvature tells you about local lean. Topology tells you about the grand stitching. You can have a scarf that lies flat at every point and still closes into a circle if its ends are joined. You can have a sheet of paper that curves in your hands and yet never acquires an edge you could fall from. Space could be like this, finite in extent but without boundary, or infinite yet connected in ways that make distant neighborhoods secretly adjacent. It might be simple as a plane, or quietly elaborate, like a medieval town where alleys fold into courtyards and passages double back under archways to surprise you with your own footprints. Imagine, just for the pleasure of it, a universe that wraps. You sail in one apparent direction, long enough, and find after ages and ages that your ship returns from the other side, your wake meeting your bow. The stars would play games in such a place. A single galaxy might have multiple apparitions in your sky, like a friend seen in mirrors at many angles. Astronomers have looked for such repetitions, for matched circles in the faint afterglow that covers everything, for patterns that murmured, "You've been here before." So far the evidence is shy. It offers neither a loud yes, nor a slam of no, more like a courteous maybe, which is where we rest tonight. All of this can feel abstract until you bring it back to sensations your body trusts. Picture walking lanes in a hill town. The streets are narrow, lanterns hung low, the stone worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. You take a turn, then another, and the way that seemed to go out now returns, kind as a hand on your shoulder guiding you home by an unfamiliar route. There was no wall, there was a shape. Space might be composed of such returns, not on the scale of minutes, but on the scale of eons. Not in alleys of limestone, but along paths of light. Or think of sound. In certain rooms, a whisper in one corner finds a listening ear in the other, carried by the room's proportions, the curve of a ceiling, the tuck of a balcony. Those who built such places learned to coax sound with arches and domes. When we ask, what is on the other side of the universe? Shape is one answer that softens the question. If space curves back on itself gently enough, the notion of an other side loosens, like a knot undone. There may be no opposite shore to stride toward, only the long round of a path that stays true and, by staying true, returns. If space is open and endless, the phrase other side becomes poetry for faraway lands that never stop being far as you travel. In both cases, the cliff we imagine turns to meadow. Our steps can slow. There's a childlike joy in these possibilities. Children run around a circular table and squeal when they catch themselves from behind. Adults hike a ridge just to feel the world fall away on both sides, the path curving forward, the horizon meeting itself in the distance. We love loops and crossings, bracelets, rings, embraces that close. Perhaps we love them because the world we inhabit is honest to them at scale. Or perhaps we simply carry our love into our models. Either way, it is a gentle love, and it leads towards sleep, rather than wakefulness. A few friendly guideposts, set in soft earth. If space is flat and simply connected, lines go on forever and never return. The map is endless. Every new page is a fresh sheet. If space is positively curved and unbounded, like the surface of a globe, but in 3 dimensions we inhabit, travel long enough in one direction, and you circle back without ever crossing an edge. The book is finite, but without a last page. If space is negatively curved, like a saddle, it opens faster than your stride, giving more room the farther you go. The book expands under your hands, each page broader than the last. And if space is topologically playful, stitched in loops, tunnels, and wraparounds, then a story you read here may reappear there, familiar in pattern if shifted in tone, like a melody that returns in a different key. As for you, here, now, notice how your body responds when shape replaces edge. The breath deepens, the jaw unclenches, the mind stops pacing at a fence line and starts strolling along a curve. You can picture the universe as a bowl, as a plane, as a saddle, as a looped scarf, whichever image loosens your shoulders, and let each be a kindness rather than a puzzle. You do not have to choose tonight. You can let the possibilities hum together, like neighboring notes in a chord, each enriching the other's calm. Before we close, a small chronology, because time likes to be included. Early on, when that first light, still to come in our next chapter, was setting out across a clearing fog, the seeds of shape were already there, tiny ripples, quantum jitters perhaps, inflated by a brief wild expansion, set the terms of structure that would grow later. The great question of global form has been present since the beginning, like a bass line under a song. We are still learning the melody it supports, and still learning how large the hall is in which the music plays. Let the hill return to you now. The sky a bowl, the trees the rim, the air smooth as the inside of a shell. If the world had an edge, the wind would behave differently. It would hesitate, but it flows. Leaves answer. Night gathers not at a wall, but everywhere at once, respectfully. Perhaps space is doing something similar, shaping itself without borders, inviting us to live inside a continuity instead of at the brink. Exhale, and let the idea of forever be not a cliff, but a gentle curve. You've already learned to trust. In the curve there is room, in the room there is sleep, and waiting just ahead, like an old photograph on a mantle, is the first light's whisper, the baby picture of the universe ready to be turned over in our hands with care and wonder, and then set quietly back as our eyelids soften. Rain on a roof, soft and even. If you've ever tuned a radio between stations and heard a faint hiss under the noise, you know the feeling of something old and everywhere speaking in the background. Long before stars, the cosmos was a bright, crowded nursery, a hot fog of light and particles jostling, bumping, scattering. Photons, little packets of light, couldn't travel far without being turned around. It was as if the air were thick with snow you couldn't see through. Then, as the universe expanded and cooled, a threshold was crossed. The fog thinned, particles paired into neutral atoms. Suddenly, light had room. It slipped free and began to stream, setting off on journeys that would last almost as long as time itself. You can picture it gently. Imagine a lake before dawn, the surface a perfect sheet. A breeze moves through, almost nothing, and yet it draws ripples that will become waves, and shores will one day shape around their habits. The early universe held ripples like these, sound waves ringing through the hot fluid, compressions and rarefactions in a cosmic hum. When the fog thinned and light escaped, that hum was frozen into the glow. A fossil music scored across the sky. Later, when matter gathered under gravity, it followed those hints as if remembering an old refrain. If numbers feel far away, let them rest. We can stay with images your body trusts. The afterglow is a shell of time around us, not a wall of stuff, a last scattering surface, like the far layer of mist you see from a hill when the valley clears. We have, over the years, learned to listen more closely to this whisper. We have painted the sky with instruments patient enough to count its freckles, to weigh their size, to hear in their spacing the tale of a universe that is nearly straight in its overall lean, filled mostly with quiet, invisible ingredients, and still widening its seams. The afterglow's pattern is a teacher that does not raise its voice. It speaks in small differences, a language of near equalities, and yet it tells us almost everything we dare to claim with confidence at midnight. Sometimes, in those delicate patterns, we look for special signatures, little curls and swirls in the light's polarization. The way its electric field prefers to lean, such swirls, if found cleanly, might hint at rumblings from an even earlier time, tremors in the fabric of space itself. If you prefer a human parallel, think of the oldest photograph in your family box, the one with sepia edges and unfamiliar coats. You can recognize a jawline, a smile you've seen in a mirror. You can also notice the limits, the blur at the frame, the way a face is turned, the missing names on the back. The cosmic baby picture is like that. It is intimate and incomplete, generous and quiet about what came before the shutter opened. We can cherish what it gives, without insisting it must yield all. A short chronology, held loosely. First, the hot fog, lively and opaque. Then, cooling, the pairing of charges into neutral atoms, the universe becoming transparent like frost melting from glass. Light pours through, carrying the memory of ripples. Time passes. The light stretches as space stretches, its color sliding from fierce brightness into a tender microwave warmth. Much, much later, worlds and beings with questions bloom in the faint glow of one small star and learn to hear that warmth as a whisper from their earliest morning. And what lies on the other side of that first light? Earlier moments, hotter and more private, where the rules we know were already singing, but the chorus was too thick to hear. In the next turning of our journey, we'll let our thoughts approach that pre-dawn, ideas of a brief, swift swelling that smoothed the stage and planted the seeds of structure, possibilities held lightly, described with care. For now, rest with the hiss of rain on roof, in your imagination. Let the afterglow be a blanket pulled up to your shoulders, thin, even, almost featureless to the touch, yet carrying the faint embroidery of beginnings. Your breath can match it. Quiet, regular, easy. The universe's first light is still arriving. You are allowed to simply receive it and drift. There is a hush just before sunrise when the world seems to hold its breath. Dew lifted on spider silk, birds considering the first note, every blade of grass outlined in a patience that feels older than weather. If we tilt our attention behind the universe's first light, behind that baby picture glowing softly in all directions, we come to a similar hush in our story. Not bright, not yet visible, but potent, a preface rather than a page. Physicists give this hush a name that sounds energetic: inflation. We hold even the loveliest stories lightly. Inflation is a powerful idea, but it remains an idea shaped by evidence rather than directly photographed. It predicts a universe very close to flat in its grand lean, with a particular distribution of speckles in that first light map. Neither too coarse nor too fine, and it suggests a preference for simplicity in those speckles, a kind of near randomness with just enough structure to grow galaxies later. Observations so far hum along with this tune. They don't prove the instrument, but the melody matches. If this begins to feel like math in dress clothes, step into a field with me for a moment. Late spring, dandelions have let go. A breeze takes their white seeds and the air becomes a slow snow, each filamented star drifting. Some float farther, some settle sooner. There is a line we cross if we walk further into the meadow. The ground dips, the air cools, and the story takes on a speculative glimmer. Some versions of inflation suggest it may be eternal, in the sense that while it ended here, making room for a hot young universe like ours to bloom, it might continue elsewhere, swelling new patches into being like bubbles in a rising loaf. Each bubble would hold its own chapter, its own mix of ingredients, perhaps its own slight variations in the rules. This multiverse picture can be soothing or dizzying depending on one's mood. Tonight we keep it at the edge of the path, as a possibility among others, noted with a nod and a smile, not chased into the thicket. What we can hold more firmly are the kindnesses inflation offers to puzzles that otherwise keep us awake. Why is the first light so uniform across regions that look too far apart to have compared notes? A rapid early widening lets distant places have once been neighbors warm to the same temperature before being carried far from each other by the swell. Why do we not see relics of exotic curvature, sharp corners in the cosmic fabric? A thorough smoothing would have pressed them out like creases from a cloth. Why do the baby picture freckles have the size they do, neither all small nor all large? A simple, steady swell tends to favor a particular balance, and our maps tilt that way too. Still, humility. Other ideas attempt these favors with different tools. Evidence must be courted, not coerced. We look for additional whispers, faint spiral signatures in the polarization of the first light, subtle markers in the distribution of the oldest galaxies, the way the universe's expansion history plays its rhythm across time. Some searchers have found hints that later turned out to be dust in our own galactic attic. That is not failure, it is housekeeping. We learn to sweep better. We learn to listen with cleaner rooms. If you lean closer, you might hear another quiet chapter, called reheating, the moment when the energy driving the swell relaxes and pours itself into particles and light, igniting the hot, dense state that leads step by step to the afterglow we can actually see. It is a handoff between two tempos, the whisper-quiet widening and the lively young cosmos of collisions and forming atoms. The details are technical by day, but at night they can rest as a concept, a baton passed in a relay we infer from the shape of the track after the race. A small human parallel helps. Think of a town square before a festival. The stalls are empty boards, the lamps are unlit, then briefly a flurry canopies unfurling, lanterns lifted, the whole space expanding from quiet possibility into a prepared place. When the candles are lit and people arrive, the setup is already complete, but you can tell somehow that the square has been smoothed and readied. Inflation, if it occurred, is the setting of the square quick, decisive, then gone, leaving traces in how the evening feels. Chronology, held loosely and kindly, first perhaps a field of energy in a high, patient state, then a slip downhill in a landscape we can barely sketch, releasing that stored hush into a swift uniform widening. Tiny quantum fluctuations, everywhere and inevitable, are carried outward and stretched into macroscopic seeds. The widening ends here. Energy becomes heat and light. The familiar hot Big Bang chapter begins. Time flows, the fog thins, the first light streams, later stars ignite, galaxies gather, worlds cool, and someone somewhere learns to listen. What does this mean for our question about the other side of the universe? Let your shoulders ease at that. You don't need the details to be lulled by the shape. A smoothing, a seeding, a handoff to light. These are friendly motions. The universe seems to have arranged itself so that complexity could grow out of calm beginnings, like frost flowers branching from a pane cooled evenly. The calm matters as much as the branching. If a last caution wants a seat before sleep, all of this is our best present poem stitched from measurements and models. We will revise the poem as clearer stanzas arrive. That is not unsettling. It is the nature of careful wonder. The sky keeps writing, and we keep learning the handwriting. Rest then, with the meadow in mind, the slow snow of dandelion seeds, some catching the sun as they drift, some vanishing into the shade, all of it unhurried. Beyond the first light's shell, the hush of before may have been brief, but it was generous. It handed us a universe where horizons are gentle and patterns can grow. In the next chapter, we'll turn from beginnings to boundaries of another sort, the neighborhoods we can't reach, not because they aren't there, but because the fabric between us and them keeps blooming. For now, breathe with the night. The pre-dawn has done its work. The day that is, the long day of stars, was given its chance, and you are welcome to sleep through the rest of the setup, warm beneath a cosmos that seems to prefer smooth openings to sharp starts. A harbor after midnight, mooring lines quiet, the tide sliding its slow syllables along the hulls. Far out, the bell buoy marks a channel you will not cross tonight. Its bronze voice arrives, but the water beyond the point remains a privacy. You feel the distance as a kind of mercy, there and not for you to travel now. The universe keeps such distances too, regions that are real, perhaps even familiar in their ingredients, and yet already drifting beyond any possible exchange. We have learned to speak of different kinds of horizons. One is the simple circle of sight, the part of space-time from which light has had time to reach us since the cosmos became transparent. Another is more subtle, and it carries a softness that matters for rest. Even if we wait forever, there are places whose light, starting now, will never arrive. Not because they are hidden behind a wall, but because the fabric between us and them is stretching in a way that outpaces any message. It is as if the tide between two piers were swelling faster than a swimmer could cross, no matter how patiently they tried. This is the neighborhood we cannot reach. Not forbidden, just receding into a later that never quite becomes here. A small vocabulary, kept gentle. The expansion of the universe is not like towns moving through fixed countryside. It is more like the countryside itself quietly growing more meadow between the towns. Nearby places barely notice. Local bonds hold, stars keep their planets, galaxies keep their stars. Farther out, the added meadow accumulates until acquaintances become postcards, and postcards become memory. The reason, as best we can tell, is an ingredient with a shy name: dark energy. It seems to act like a pressure of emptiness, a uniform nudge in the arithmetic of space that makes the widening not only continue but accelerate. We do not yet know its essence. We do know its effect, an everywhere swell that becomes decisive at grand scales. There's a temptation to imagine a speed limit sign and a rebellion against it, but nothing is breaking the rules. The speed limit that binds light refers to motion through space, not to the growth of space itself. Two far harbors can find more sea laid gently between them, without any ship making a sprint. Messages that set out long ago can still arrive, like bottles washed ashore from an earlier tide. Messages launched tonight from certain distances will never land. The difference is not disobedience, it is timing. If you like pictures that breathe, try this. A lantern festival on a still lake. Hundreds of small lit boats are set adrift at dusk. Close ones glide by. You can reach with your paddle and touch their wood. Farther out, the lanterns seem to move away as the wind rises. A few that were already on their way continue toward you and pass golden and quiet. Those released now far out on the widening ripple will never reach your dock. You can see them, you can love them, you cannot meet them. The lake has simply become too roomy in between. Astronomers give careful names to these boundaries. One is a Hubble sphere, a kind of momentary mark where recession due to expansion equals light's own pace. That mark is not a hard horizon. Messages launched from beyond it long ago can, under the right conditions, still reach us because the mark itself shifts as the universe changes tempo. The truer limit is the event horizon for our cosmos, the line between forever reachable and forever out of touch, defined not by today, but by all tomorrows. We draw it not with a ruler, but with patience, calculating what any beam could hope to do as the bloom continues. Its exact placement is a matter for daylight work and subtle models. Tonight, it is enough to know that such a limit likely exists, born from the universe's accelerating wideness. There is an ache here if we push, and a calm if we soften. The ache asks, what are we losing? The calm answers, we were never promised everything. The sky, generous as it is, gives what it can, letters from a vast past, arriving in order, stamped with their distances. The regions that are slipping beyond correspondence are not being erased. They are simply retiring from our exchange. In some long future, distant galaxies will fade from our catalogue, their light stretched into invisibility by the music of expansion. Our night will become more local. The Milky Way, perhaps merged with its neighbours into a single grand island, will be the lantern that remains. This sounds lonely, until you recall that home has always been particular. What you love about a city is not that it contains every street in the world, but that it holds yours. A soft chronology, because time likes a hand on its shoulder. After the first light began to roam, gravity, working with the ripples seeded earlier, drew matter into webs, galaxies, clusters, filaments like frost. For a long while the widening slowed under that mutual pull. Later the quiet insistence of dark energy became important, turning slow down into speed up. That was the moment the future gathered its unreachables, the point after which some neighborhoods could no longer trade light with ours, no matter how we waited. The past keeps delivering what it already set in motion. The future withholds some fresh replies. How should we carry this? At night, like an old friendship that distance has made quiet. You do not stop caring when letters cease. You fold the ones you have and keep them in a drawer. You remember the handwriting and the jokes that fit only their mouth. You understand that love does not require a current address. The sky is allowed the same dignity. Reach again for the harbor picture. The bell buoy's voice you hear is from a moment ago, a wave carried intact. If the fog thickens and the wind shifts, you will still hear a few more tolls that were already on their way. Then the sound will vanish into weather. You would not accuse the bell of silence. You would accept the conditions and tuck your hands into your sleeves and listen to the near water. The near water is not lesser, it is yours tonight. There is also a curious consolation in recognizing that unreachable does not mean unknowable, in principle. The pattern of what we can see, stitched together with the mathematics that has served us well, lets us infer the existence of an event horizon and the taste of what lies beyond. Not dragons, not a different physics for its own sake, but more of the grand weave, growing farther in a way that rhymes with what we know. We are not gazing toward a cliff, we are listening to a cadence. The cadence says letters will thin. The cadence also says, the rules that carried the earlier letters still hold. A practical kindness hides in all this. We are licensed to focus. The part of the universe that will always be able to speak with us is already full enough to teach, to nourish wonder, to cradle sleep. We do not need to chase the receding lanterns. We can let the unreachable be a lullaby rather than a task. The mind often rests when it accepts that not every door must be opened tonight. There is, too, a hush of gratitude. We live in a rare time when the sky still carries a deep history from far away, when the archive of light is rich and varied and arriving, on scales much longer than our lives. That archive will thin. Our descendants, should they look up in an age of great distance, will read a simpler sky. We are the lucky midnight librarians. We can turn many pages before sleep. We can remember to handle them gently. If a last caution wants to sit by the bed, horizons, even the event kind, are not moral lines. They do not split the universe into important and unimportant sections. They only separate will touch from will not touch. If anything, they invite humility. We belong to one neighborhood, among many connected by origin, separated by circumstance, kin in law, if not in correspondence. That is enough to warm the room. Let the harbor return now. Hear the low water against the pilings, the rope creak, the bell that might toll once more, and then be done for the night. Out beyond the point, more sea. On your side, a lamp, a coat around your shoulders, a breath you can follow all the way to its end. What cannot be reached does not need to be chased. You can let it drift, tenderly, into the category of still real, and feel your muscles answer. In the next wandering, we will step into a gentler hall, mirrors and parallels, possibilities suggested by early swelling and quantum rules, being careful not to claim what we cannot prove, but allowing imagination to pace softly along the corridor. For now, set a corridor at night, patterned carpet, soft sconces, doors spaced along the hall like quiet thoughts. You walk slowly, key in hand, and catch your reflection in a framed mirror, then another reflection in a second mirror at an angle, the images multiplying, stepping away into a vanishing parade. Each looks like you, and yet each is shifted, a fraction dimmer, a hair delayed. The world loves mirrors for this reason. They let us feel multiplicity without leaving the room. Cosmology, when it is brave and careful, sometimes entertains a similar feeling. Perhaps our observable sphere is one lit room among many, doors leading to neighboring rooms we cannot open from here. Perhaps the building has many wings. Perhaps in some deeper sense, there are even other buildings, other streets. These musings go by a broad, baggy name, multiverse, and within that bag are different ideas, some friendly to data, some mostly poetry for now. Tonight we hold them gently as if they were postcards tucked in a book, worth admiring without needing to mail replies. One path to the idea comes from that early swelling we visited. Inflation. If the swell did not stop everywhere at once, but relaxed in patches, then each relaxed patch might become a bubble universe, hot and lively like ours, separated from its siblings by regions still in the hush. The image is a field of lanterns released on a dark lake at different moments, clusters here, a solitary light there, ripples widening between them. Each lantern circles its own little world, their reflections kiss and part, their flames do not mingle. In such a picture, what lies beyond our horizon is not a single other side, but simply more, a continuing of lanterns we will never reach. Another path comes from the mathematics that guides small things, quantum rules that allow multiple possibilities to live in parallel descriptions, until an interaction makes one path our experience. Some thinkers stretch that formal, instrumental story into a literal one. Every allowed outcome happens, branching into countless histories. This is a very different multiverse than the Bubble Lantern Lake. One is a patchwork of cosmic neighborhoods, the other is a branching of narratives. They are often mentioned together. They are not the same. Tonight we keep them distinct, like two songs that share a theme, but not a chorus. A third path is humbler and closer to hand. Even within a single, endless universe that is relatively uniform, if space truly goes on and on, then patterns, arrangements of matter, strings of coin flips, must eventually repeat, or nearly repeat, simply because there are only so many ways to arrange a finite patch. Somewhere unimaginably far, there could be a region that rhymes with ours down to uncanny detail, diverging only where chance took a different step. This isn't metaphysics. It is combinatorics, multiplied by immensity, but the distances involved are so beyond correspondence that the idea remains a bedtime story with no practical sequel. How do we carry these notions without overclaiming and without waking ourselves? By remembering what brought them to our door. Bubble universes arrive as a natural maybe from inflation's mathematics, an inference some versions encourage rather than a demand of all. Branching worlds arrive as an attempt to take the quiet rules of quantum theory with full literalness, one interpretation among several that match experiments equally well. Infinite repetition tales arrive if space is infinite and sufficiently even-handed. None of these have yet offered a clean signature we can test with a backyard telescope or a careful satellite alone. Some have proposed signs, bruises in the baby picture, where bubbles might have collided, subtle shifts in constants that could vary from room to room, but the evidence is, so far, modest, shy, or absent. The right posture, then, is relaxed curiosity. You don't have to dismiss mirror halls outright, and you don't have to get lost in them. You can walk the corridor, notice how reflections deepen the space, and keep your key ready for the room that is yours. There are human parallels that help the body understand. Think of the you that would have taken a different city job, or said yes that one spring, or learned the violin. We sometimes keep these versions near us in a soft way, not as hauntings but as companions, possibilities that lend our present self a sense of depth. Even if those lives are not literally being lived, they serve as mirrors that tint our choices. The multiverse notions function similarly in science. They help us ask why the ingredients here are what they are. Why does the chemistry of stars work so conveniently for life? Why do the numbers that shape atoms sit in ranges that allow complexity? One reply, controversial but calm at night, is that many rooms exist with many settings, and observers are most likely to wake in rooms where waking is supported. This is called an anthropic reasoning, less a proclamation than a caution against surprise. It doesn't prove the hallway, it simply says, if the hallway exists, your open door is not shocking. Yet we should be tender with ourselves here. Explanations that lean on many unseen rooms can feel like we're moving the question down the corridor. Why these laws becomes, why this hallway? It's all right to leave that for daylight. The value tonight is in the softened anxiety around edges. If rooms abound, then the other side of the universe is just another room, lit according to its own switches, unreachable and unnecessary for our resting. If rooms do not abound, if there is only one grand salon without partition, the calm remains. Our horizon is still a gentle boundary of time, not a cliff. A small chronology, because stories like a timeline even when mirrors are involved. Perhaps before the first light we can see, a field swelled and relaxed in some places first, lighting bubbles like ours. Perhaps some bubbles grazed and left marks we have not convincingly found. Inside our bubble, particles and forces cooled into their present habits, writing chemistry in stars. Within the quantum rules that govern small things, outcomes continue to wear their cloud of possibilities, until interactions pared them down to the single thread we experience. All of this unfolded quietly, governed by equations that don't rush, just as your hallway walk finds each door exactly where architecture put it decades ago. Testability matters in science. It also relaxes at night. We can remember the standard: a theory earns weight when it stakes a risk, when it predicts a pattern that could in principle go otherwise. Some multiverse pictures flirt with untestability, others court it, suggesting specific signatures. The jury is unhurried. Meanwhile, the sky we can touch with instruments is already generous, and it does not require extra rooms to be beautiful. If you'd like a gentle image to close your eyes around, Consider a library long after closing. Stacks extend past the cone of your desk lamp. You can see only a few aisles, and yet you feel the presence of many more books you will never pull, bindings you will never crack, stories that rhyme with yours, and stories that don't. The lamplit pages in front of you are enough to bring sleep. The rest of the shelves are not a burden. They are a comfort, a sense that words continue out there, softly, while you rest here. Or this, a hall of mirrors at a fair empty at midnight. The bulbs along the frame hum. Your reflection recedes and repeats, each image a little altered by glass and angle. You don't need to chase them. You can enjoy the first few, smile at the idea of the rest, and step back into the quiet air. What then is on the other side of the universe, in this chapter's light? Perhaps nothing like a single opposite shore. Perhaps a continuation, more rooms, more mirrors, more corridors of lore and chance. Or perhaps only our room, enormously wide, with reflections provided not by other spaces but by the mathematics we use to describe possibilities. Either way, tonight you may trade the urge to peek behind every door for the pleasure of turning down your own bed. We'll keep one thread from this hall as we move onward. The notion that space might have neighbors not by distance, but by dimension. Pages of a book pressed together, close yet unseen. That is the next corridor. Quieter still. For now, let your breath find the corridor's pace. Long, even, a lantern every few steps. Mirrors or no mirrors, rooms or one large room. The dark is kind enough to hold you where you are. A closed book on a bedside table. 2 pages pressed together, so close that ink from one sometimes ghosts onto the other. You can rub a fingertip along the outer edge and feel only one smooth surface. Yet inside, there are near neighbors separated by almost nothing. Just a thickness of paper, a breath of wood pulp, a silence. Some nights cosmology borrows that image. Perhaps our familiar space, the 3 dimensions you can point along with a finger, is itself a page, a flexible sheet adrift inside a larger quiet. This page might have a proper name in the mathematics, something like a brain, short for membrane. The larger quiet, holding it, is sometimes called a bulk, a roomy place with more dimensions than we experience. We don't need the technicals tonight. It is enough to hold the feeling worlds as pages, close yet unseen, turning softly in a wider book. Why dream such dreams? Partly because gravity behaves like a polite whisperer. Compared with the other forces we know, gravity seems strangely gentle, as if some of its strength leaks into hallways we don't walk. In brain stories, most fields, light, matter, charge, might be bound to our page, while gravity alone arches through the wider book, thinning as it spreads beyond our sheet. The image isn't proof, it's a possible rhyme between equation and sensation. It offers a way to picture why apples fall and stars orbit, with a restraint that leaves room for galaxies to be airy and grand. There are other, older hints that make pages feel natural. Mathematics itself often asks for more directions than our senses deliver. Curves are easier to draw when you allow an extra axis. Knots loosen when you lift a strand into a higher room. If the universe keeps its accounts using a ledger with more columns than we can see, then a page and book picture becomes a gentle translator. It tells us the sums may be done elsewhere, but the totals you touch are still yours. Then there is a bolder suggestion, handled with care. Let's step back to the body, where understanding lives most easily at this hour. Another picture, 2 taut drumheads, face to face, vibrating in slow, deep sympathy. Tap one, and the other answers with a ghost of the rhythm. If our page and another lie close, the shapes could speak, each ripple in one stirring a whisper in the other. Gravity, with its long reach and patient tempo, is the likely messenger. Other forces, bright and fidgety, may be homebodies on the sheet, reluctant to cross the gap. The room between the bulk is quiet but not empty. It carries the beat. There is a soft lesson in all of this about edges once more. If pages are bound, then the other side of the universe need not be far away along our sheet. It might be as near as the thickness of a single unseeable dimension, closer than skin, and still forever separate in practice. Like 2 faces of a window that never meet, near in absolute measure, unreachably apart in use. The mind relaxes when it accepts this. Closeness and distance are different currencies in higher rooms. A gentle chronology helps to keep the thread from tangling. Long before stars, perhaps before our familiar time had a rhythm, the book existed in some balanced hush. Pages drifted, warped by their own gravities, and the shape of the larger quiet, a slow approach. A kiss along a seam, energy translated into heat on our sheet. The glow we now call the first light began its outward run. Later, matter gathered. Later still we asked questions. All of those laters belong to our page's calendar. The book's calendar, if it has one, might be stranger. We don't need to know it to sleep. If a part of you wonders about test and trust, that part is wise. Science, even in its nighttime gentleness, lives by wagers that reality could have refused. Brain pictures make wagers. Some are nearly spent. No sign of gravity's mischief at the smallest distances we've managed to probe with care. No clean bruises in the baby picture of light that would announce a collision. Other wagers remain open, written in the hope that future instruments tuned more finely will find a jitter or a drift that can only come from a neighbor's breath. It may be that the book keeps its quiet. It may be that we learn to hear. The human mirror is reassuring. You have lived alongside neighbors you never met, separated by thin walls, sharing songs through plaster and the aroma of garlic and rain. You knew them by inference and by kindness. Footsteps, laughter, a chair moved late. You did not need to knock to be comforted by their presence. The brain picture, whether true or not, invites a similar ease. We can imagine a cosmos in company. We can rest as if we were not alone, and still accept that our door remains our own. Feel for a moment the way fabrics fold. A scarf dropped on a bed makes soft hills, two parts of the cloth that were distant now touch, while points that were neighbors drift apart. In higher rooms, folding can happen without crinkles, smoothly, like air folding into air. If space is such a cloth and dimensions are the ways it may drape, then where becomes a generous word. Our page may be everywhere it needs to be, and yet still have a neighbor, present in a manner we cannot triangulate, only sense through the long patience of gravity. Sometimes people hear this, and ask, with a smile, whether ghosts are just visitors from the next page. It's a sweet question, and it deserves a sweet answer. Wonder is allowed, and stories are good company, but tonight we are careful. The pages, if real, speak through mathematics, and through the slow test of measures, not through footsteps in halls. Calm sits with clarity. We needn't borrow mysteries we don't require. What does this chapter offer to our guiding question about the other side? It offers a new direction. Other might be beside rather than beyond. Side might be literal, a neighboring sheet, a twin page so close the book creaks, and still entirely unreachable in practice. Or not, it might be that our world is the whole page, and the book is a metaphor we will lay aside in time. Either way, the lesson survives. Edges soften into seams, and seams pressed gently become smooth to the touch. Let the bedside image return. The house is quiet. The book on the table holds its pages together, each with its own printed world. You do not need to open it now. You can feel, without reading, that many stories live close by. Your own story, the one unfolding in the room, has its breath and its pulse. It is enough. If the book rustles as the night air shifts, you may smile at the thought that the world has neighbors, and then you may close your eyes. Perhaps, first, a season of gatherings. Galaxies that now drift as neighbors may fold together, their stars rehoused in larger cities of light. You can picture lantern festivals merging on the lake we imagined earlier, patterns overlapping, reflections mingling, wakes knitting into broader swells. Within those unions, starbirth carries on, though more slowly, as gas is spent and recycled. The exuberant youth of the cosmos gives way to a middle age of quieter projects, small red stars keeping house for extraordinary spans, blue giants rare as fireworks. The ordinary suns like ours finishing their letters and sealing them with a warm fade. Time lengthens. The script simplifies. Element by element, star by star, the bright chemistry runs down. Many suns cool to dim embers, white dwarfs sighing their heat into space, neutron stars holding their silence like bells that once rang and now remember the shape of ringing. Planets, if any remain, are tidally readjusted or set adrift to wander as cold stones through a widening dark. None of this is tragic at night's pace. It is the slow closing of a book well read, a library that remains but turns out its lamps room by room. There are eras beyond these, hinted at in mathematics and carried to us as possibilities. Black holes, those deep wells written by gravity into the fabric of space, become the last keepers of drama. They feed sparingly on what drifts too near, then sit like dark reservoirs of memory. If the rules we've drawn from thought and measurement hold, Even these wells are not forever. They may whisper themselves away by a patient process radiating in quanta so small and so slow that words like century and age lose their meaning. Plates by spans our tongues weren't asked to name. In this telling, the long tomorrow is a thinning, first of light, then of warmth, then of organized stories, until only a diffuse hush remains. That hush is sometimes called heat death. Though the phrase is harsher than the feeling, it imagines the universe relaxed to an evenness where no more work can be coaxed from contrast. No hills left for water to fall from, no hot colds to trade into motion, a lake without ripples, a sky without currents, not ruined, simply rested. If this future comes to pass, it will do so without spectators, without sorrow, with the same courtesy that dusk shows when it arrives, everywhere at once, without a need to be announced. Other futures, held with equal care, float in the space of ideas. Perhaps the widening we sense now, driven by that shy ingredient we call dark energy, will change its character, quickening into a rip that outpaces even the bonds that hold galaxies and atoms. That story is dramatic on the page and soft in the room. It remains a maybe, bounded by what we haven't yet measured. Perhaps the universe turns out to cycle long, slow breaths of growth and return. Our present chapter 1 swell among many. Hints exist in some models, and counter hints in others, or perhaps a deeper field decides, as fields sometimes do in the company of quantum rules, to shift its state, rewriting the background terms of reality in an instant we would never see coming. If that sentence raises your shoulders, let it pass. These are daylight speculations, and night is better served by kinder weather. What matters for rest is not which ending wins the vote, eons from now, but how each possibility carries the same lullaby. Edges soften into horizons, changes happen by patience, more than by shock. The story prefers long sentences over exclamations. The cosmos appears to have chosen continuity as its central aesthetic. Even when it surprises, it does so with coherence. There is, tucked in these vistas, a familiar consolation, a vastness that does not require you to hold it. When you were a child, perhaps you stood at the edge of an ocean and understood, for the first time, that it went on after you turned your back, that waves would keep braiding themselves whether you watched or not. That knowledge did not burden you. It freed you to play in the tide pool at your feet. The long tomorrow works the same way. Knowing that time extends and the story continues is permission to attend to the small, to love the present lamp, to sleep. A gentle chronology for the last time, set down like smooth stones. Now a bright age of galaxies. Later, a slow merging and a redder light. Later still, an ember era of long-lived stars, finishing their careful songs. After that, a quiet of remnants. Dwarfs, giants gone to memory, black holes patient as hills. Far beyond, perhaps the thinning of those hills into mist. And beyond even that, whichever ending the laws allow, a hush, a loop, a change of key. At every step, the shoreline shifts, without a cliff. Back in our room, on our page, the images we've gathered nest like birds. The lake at dusk, the fog that widens the world by waiting, the hill town whose streets return you home by surprise. Mirrors in a corridor, multiplying without menace. Lanterns drifting on a festival night. A book closed, pages pressed in neighborly silence. Each picture has done its small job, which is to show that the other side of the universe is less a place to conquer than a way to be gentle with limits. There may be no other side in the sense we first imagined. No wall, no opposite shore, but there is always a beyond, and the beyond is kind enough to let us rest here. If you would like one more tactile thought to carry into sleep, hold the sound of rain on a distant roof. It is the universe's favorite meter, even, unhurried, older than roofs and younger than your breathing. Between the drops are rests. In those rests is room for you. You have perhaps noticed that, as we traveled, the urge to peek beyond every border softened into something else, a willingness to be in the middle. Middle is a generous word. It admits that there is more behind, and more ahead, more beside and more within, and still it grants the comfort of a place to stand. You are in the middle of a room, the size of everything. The edges are distant, or curved, or not the kind of edges that the windows face out on time, and the view is a lullaby. So we close, not with an answer but with a shape of permission. Let the lake be still, let the horizon keep its courteous distance. Let the rain measure the roof, let the book rest closed, its pages warm with unwritten stories. What's on the other side of the universe may be only more universe, or neighbors folded so near they're forever unseen, or rooms we'll never enter. Any of these is enough. Each turns dread into depth, urgency into ease. Breathe. The long tomorrow is vast, and it is friendly. Your tonight is small, and it is precious. Between them, there is no conflict, only a rhythm you can feel in your ribs.